One of the favorite things that digital artists like to do is to paint that sweet rim light on the edges of their characters. In this video, I'll show you how lighting works, how to paint rim light correctly, and the 3 mistakes that you should avoid while painting rim light. So stick around till the end of the video because this is going to be packed with a ton of value. I promise you that by the end of this video, you'll have a much better understanding of how this lighting works, and you should be able to paint better rim light on your characters. So without wasting any more time, let's do this. So first of all, we need to understand how lighting works. And for that, I have this 3D model of a head. Nothing fancy here, just a regular 3D model that I downloaded from Sketchfab. Shout out to the artist who worked on this. I'll be sure to add a link to this model in the description of this video. So since we are in Blender, we can actually add some lights in this scene. We can basically emulate real lighting scenario. So we'll just add a point light, and I'll just keep the point light on the back of this head and increase its value to 500. So it's glowing bright. So now we have the light source directly behind this head, and as you can see, it's lighting up the back area of the head. Now if we go to the front view and we zoom in a little bit, you can see that there is very thin lighting on the edges of this character. So it's on the side of the head, the side of the ears, on the neck, and on the top of the head as well. It's a very thin line. So this outline type of lighting happens when the subject is directly lit from behind. The edges of the subject kind of looks like an outline. So yeah, this is rim light in a scenario where the subject is lit directly from behind. You can also see that the light on the edges of the subject is not perfectly uniform. It's a bit thicker on some areas and it tapers off. One of the common mistakes while painting rim light is that the artists actually draw that rim light as an outline with a very uniform thickness. Now let's go back to the light and pull it up a little bit. Now as you can see that the point light is now lighting up the top of the head slightly more than what it was like before. And if we go to the front view, we can see that a larger area on the head has been lit up. And also, since our light is perfectly in the center, the light tapers off at the sides of the head. Now it's lighting up the side of the head, almost as similar as it was lighting up the top of the head. And if you can closely see the shape of the light, it's not very uniform. It again tapers off at the edges. Now if we move the light away from the center, you can now see that a larger portion of the head is lit up. And you can also see that the rim light is cutting off almost at the ear level. Because of that ear, there is a shadow forming on the head. So the light is not around the whole side of the character, but it cuts off especially around the ear. Now let's move the light further on the left, and you can see even a larger portion of the head is now lit up, and we can see the different planes of the head now. Rim light acts like this. It's not uniform, it doesn't act like an outline, and it affects the different planes of the surface that you have painted. Let's look at the shape of this highlight. It's not uniform. It has a unique shape, and the shape of this highlight is translated by the actual form of the head. Also notice that the intensity of this light is not uniform across the whole head. And here on the ear, we can also see that some of the edges of the ear is catching that rim light. Alright, now we have another 3D model of a dragon. So when there is a rim light on the edges of this character's neck, we can of course see that there are some scales or texture on the skin. So it's not a smooth plain surface, but has a lot of texture. Now if we look closely, we can see that within the shape of the rim light, we can also see some shadows suggesting the texture. So again, the rim light is not acting as a one smooth outline, but it breaks at certain point, and we can also see some shadow shapes within the rim light area. This actually helps a lot, suggesting the textural detail when a character is lit using a rim light scenario like this one. Let's move on and look at some photos. So this character is lit directly from behind. The kind of lighting that we just experimented with the head model in Blender. So since this character is lit directly from behind, we can see that the rim light is acting almost like an outline around the edges of this character. So we can see the outline going around the silhouette on the left side and on the right side of this character. Let's look at another example. This subject is also lit from behind. I think this is the light source. It's slightly elevated, so we can see a lot more highlights on the top area and not too much on the areas that are below the hat. Since the light source is directly in the center, we can see the rim light on the left side of the hat as well as the right side of the hat. Let's look at another one. In this scenario, the light source is not directly behind the character, but slightly more towards the left. But it's still behind the subject, so it's lighting up the edge of the head. And if we just look at the shape of the highlights, we can actually see that the form of the head is dictating the shapes of these highlights. Let's look at another one. The light is on the left and behind, and the character's face is also catching some bounce light as well. There are some shadows forming within the shape of the light. Now let's look at this example. This is again very similar to our little experiment in Blender, where we moved the light to the left. You can also see some interesting shapes forming on the jacket. So it's not just one single outline around the jacket, but it goes on inside and makes some interesting shapes as well. The same is the case here. We can see some interesting highlight shapes. And another interesting thing that we notice here is that the light intensity doesn't seem very uniform. And even the color of the light, it's not the same for the skin and for the hair. The same light is shining upon the hair and the skin, but it has a different color on the skin and a very different color on the hair. And now let's move on to painting some rim light on the characters. So now that we have understood how lighting works, let's make this quick little sketch. I know this is a terrible sketch for a head, but for demonstration purposes, this speed paint would do. So now we are painting the rim light on this character, and as you can see, we are putting all the knowledge to good use. We are lighting the character from the back and from the side, and as you can see that the rim light is forming around the contours of the head. Here's what the lighting looks like, and this is what we have learned so far. So mostly it doesn't look like an outline, and it's non-uniform. It's at some areas we have a thicker highlight, and on some areas we have a thinner one. And the light basically wraps over the form. It doesn't just sit on the edges of this character, because at the end the character is not a 2D plane, but the form is more of a 3D form. So the light would affect different planes of the 3D form. And lastly, it tapers off and breaks at certain areas. And if we look at a colored lighting scenario, we also observe that the highlighted areas on different surfaces doesn't necessarily have the same color and value. So the color and value on the skin can be different from the color and value on the hair, or the color and value on the character's clothing, for example. Alright, that's it for today. I hope you have a much better understanding of rim light now. Don't forget to drop a like, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.